We are joined this morning by Austin Golding. He's president and CEO of Golding Barge Line. Always good to catch up with Austin. Good morning, my friend. How are you?
Good morning, Richard. Good to see you. Doing good.
You as well. What is going on right now on the mighty Mississippi?
Well, we're getting all the water that everybody heard about falling in the Kentucky and Tennessee Valley, and all these weather systems that cause such havoc in the mid-continent. It's all coming by Vicksburg now. So we have about, looking at the gauge now live, we probably have about 3 feet to go. So on Easter Sunday, we'll probably be about 48 feet. And then it's going to fall out pretty quick. So by the first week of May, we'll be well under flood stage again, probably around 35 feet. And so this is for sure just totally related to the weather event, but it's seasonal high water. It's springtime high water, and we haven't had it in 3 or 4 years. So kind of nice to have it. Low water's tougher to manage than high water.
Yeah, I certainly could understand that. And then there's that, like the middle ground, right, where it's high enough that it's good for traffic on the river without significant flooding, right?
Yeah, when we get into this stage, for sure, it's harder to go north and slower to go north. And then going southbound, there's a lot of daylight closures, nighttime closures, and daylight only runs, especially here at Vicksburg, some of the other bridges. And it's a lot harder to get on and off some of these docks. Some of these docks, a little bit higher water than we're looking at, will go offline too. So I know a lot of the farmers and people that offload their product at a lot of our ports in Mississippi get stressed whenever the facilities themselves can go offline because the water's too high. But yeah, the transit, for sure, it's a lot harder when the water's running this fast and is this high, for sure.
Why does it? I mean, I get why it's a slower buildup, right? It takes longer for the water to get to the big river as it all runs off and ultimately makes its way south. But then the fall, pretty precipitous, like you were describing as well. Why does it go down so quickly? Just because there's not as far for it to travel to get into the Gulf? Well,
that's a great question, Richard. And I'll put on my towboater hat here, and certainly not my Corps of Engineers hat, because I'm sure they'd have a lot longer answer. But I think they control this river pretty well. And I think when they have all that water and it's behind a lot of dams and it's behind a lot of control structures, they know about how much water it can hold, even in flood stage, to not cause much disruption. So they'll help prevent a really, really bad event downriver by slowly releasing the water. So when you slowly release it, eventually you're out. And so the water will fall out really quickly when it gets back to manageable level or usual flow. But if they released it all at once, I think it would be really bad. When I've talked to them, a lot of them say, well, we don't have as much control over the flow sometimes as people think. But, this system down here in 11 got really tested with that water that was similar to the 27 flood, and the levees held. And so I think they know that this lower Mississippi River system, doesn't have a lot of city front up on it that can be threatened, or a lot of homes that can be threatened. It's a lot of farmland and hunting land and agricultural impact. But they can put water down here slowly and fill up this system to protect the Ohio Valley, to protect the Tennessee Valley and the upper Mississippi, Illinois River, Arkansas River even. So I think they manage it pretty well. And this is man's impact on how the river flows is pretty incredible.
Yeah, it really is a fascinating conversation. And I'm curious, how far north does the Corps of Engineer control? I mean, all the way into Minnesota, where the Mississippi starts? And they're working in conjunction from Minnesota all the way to New Orleans in terms of what's released and when and how much and the way it flows?
For sure. The Corps of Engineers, the ones that they have, the federal government runs, it works as a system all the way around. The one outlier, maybe 2 or 3 outliers you could say, but the one for sure is a good example, TVA. They're providing a lot of power with this. So they have a little different motivation sometimes in some of their decisions. But it is a system. And, as we lobby for new locks and dams and new infrastructure, if one part of this system gets weak, the whole system can suffer, because most of this cargo goes through many parts of the system to get where it's going. One example is Industrial Lock in New Orleans. Another example of a new one is Olmsted Lock on the Ohio River. 2 of these locks, most of these locks were built 100 years ago, when all this infrastructure started going in. So when we talk about replacing it, for sure, the way they control the flow, the commercial traffic, the environmental impact, it's all a giant system that they're working together on.
Do you have any idea what the cost would be to build a new lock and dam? I mean, if you just said, hey, there's a
Sure.
portion of the river that needs a new lock and dam system, what would it cost to put one of those in?
Well, first, the kind of shocking part to some people is there are no locks and dams on the lower Mississippi River at all. So from Cairo down.
Right. Yeah, I guess I'm talking. So it's all tributaries that have those.
Right. So depending on the tributary, let's say that industrial lock and dam there in New Orleans. The lock and dam itself is for sure at least $1 billion project, in my opinion, from what I've understood. But it also includes moving thousands of people that live really close to it in New Orleans. Now, you go to a more rural area where you have more elbow room and more space, and the land isn't such a hot debate, and you don't have as much red tape to cut through. You probably save a lot of money, but it's probably a much different style of projects. But if we're going to say a brand new lock and dam that doesn't exist, that we're going to have to start over, the Olmsted lock and dam was a $2 or $3 billion project originally that really was even larger than that when they finished it. It was way outside its budget by the time they finished it. So, a lot of these projects are rehab projects, and we really haven't talked about building many new ones. Most of the system as it's set up is pretty good, but to rebuild it or to rehab it, each year we're talking, $8 to $10 billion in operation and maintenance budget for the Corps of Engineers, and then a special $2 to $3 billion for new construction and rehab. But when I see 40 and 50 and $60 billion going to other causes, I'm like, look, I know getting a few. Yeah, I mean, I feel horrible asking for more billion, but I feel like we're a better investment than a lot of these things that we get that you just lose track of the numbers on. And every dollar we get, is also matched by a Inland Waterway User Trust Fund. And I know I'm kind of getting in the weeds here, but it's a lot like the highway fund. We pay a diesel tax. So on top of our tax dollars that we're paying diesel tax, and our customers are paying diesel tax. It's supposed to go, and it does go, towards these industrial projects. But I've gone to D.C. and asked them to raise that tax. And I walk into some of these offices and you're the first person that's come here all day that's asked for a tax increase. I'm like, well, we need it that bad. If these projects fail, I go out of business. So, it's a worthy investment, and it's something that I think, I'll add this on the tail end of it. Our delegation really understands from top to bottom. It doesn't matter Democrat or Republican. Mississippi's delegation, for my whole career, has always valued the river, the Tennessee Tom-Bigby, the Mississippi Gulf Coast. So we're lucky, but we are very impacted by it too.
You talk about Mississippi's delegation. Pretty significant news, I think. Mike Ezell, subcommittee chair over waterways and the Coast Guard within the Transportation and Infrastructure larger committee. How big a deal is that?
Huge. Mike, all the jobs there at Ingalls, all the jobs that flow through the Mississippi Gulf Coast, it's huge. I've met with Congressman Ezell several times, and he gets it. He's a proud Mississippian. He gets pro-business stuff. He's no nonsense. I hope he stays up there. He's really proud to be there too. I can tell you, he takes a lot of pride in the job. So I'm really excited about that. There's other Mississippians in key spots too that are working their way through the system here that are going to be really key to Mississippi's prosperity and the way we can use these waterways. So I'm really excited about that. I'm really excited about Senator Wicker being on the Armed Services Committee. There's some other stuff going on in the Corps that I really like that's putting some Mississippi-minded people in the right spot. So, Mississippi's become a really good leader on the waterways and a real good advocate for them too.
One of the things that I love about Congressman Ezell, there are lots of politicians that really like the sound of their voice, and they use lots of words to not say anything. Congressman Ezell's not like that. His answers are shorter, they are succinct, and he gets to the point pretty quickly.
That's what I told him. I said, man, I appreciate how your candor, but we need you up here. Just the honesty, too much honesty. I mean, just play the game a little bit because we need some common sense guys up here. But he's a great guy. I've really enjoyed talking with him, and a lot of laughs and a lot of common sense in those conversations for sure.
On the other side of the break, I want us to talk a little bit about tariffs. You've mentioned farmers a couple of times and offloading and their product for exports and all those things. So we'll get to that in a second. But I'm intrigued by you mentioning Ingalls. And, I mean, obviously the shipbuilding business is different than the business that you were in. But are these two industries tied more closely together than some people might realize?
Absolutely. That'd be a great conversation to have. They're absolutely tied together. They're married at the hip.
We'll do that when we come back. We'll try and pack a lot into the final 6 minutes of this 7 o'clock hour. Visiting with Austin Golding. He's president and CEO of Golding Barge Line in Vicksburg, Mississippi. Quick timeout. Mornings with Richard Cross, SuperTalk Mississippi. We're back with you right after this. Good to be with you on this Wednesday morning. Trying to think about what day it is. Mornings with Richard Cross, SuperTalk Mississippi, streaming at supertalk.fm, SuperTalk TV, and on your SuperTalk Mississippi radio stations. Austin Golding is my guest. He's the president and CEO of Golding Barge Line. We're going to try and squeeze in two big topics in 6 minutes and see how far we can get. We're talking about before the break, the relationship between the river industry, I'm using that as a really big term, and the shipbuilding industry on the Gulf Coast. What is that?
So really the shipbuilding industry and the river industry go hand in hand with just their ability to have that many people that can weld, that many people that can be craftsmen. And there's a policy called the Jones Act that I don't know if some of your listeners may or may not be familiar with, but the Jones Act says anything that moves U.S. port to U.S. port, a vessel has to be built in the U.S., owned by U.S. Ownership, and crewed by U.S. crew members. And so that forces the shipbuilding industry to have to stay alive with new construction here. Otherwise, I could build my towboats and barges in Mexico or in Southeast Asia and have them shipped here for a fraction of the cost. But in order for there to be a national interest in having craftsmen here that can build ships so that in case of wartime we could spool up a navy, 100 years ago, it's actually just turned 100, the Jones Act was created to ensure that we had a shipbuilding base here for commercial and defense purposes. So Ingalls, right there along with the shipyards that build my equipment, would all be utilized in wartime. So there's a provision that the Jones Act protects it. Now, our inability to is really tied up with the amount of cost and red tape here versus the lack of that at the alternative place or what our competitors around the world do. I mean, we build them safer, we build them better, we build them with more quality, better working conditions. The other countries sacrifice that. And so I don't really, I don't want to build a cheap boat internationally. I want to build here in the U.S. using U.S. crews the same way it is. So I'm a big Jones Act advocate, but it does make it more difficult when we can't build them internationally and bring them back. But there again, we wouldn't have a shipbuilding base here. So I think investing in it, making grant money happen and kind of greasing the wheels to let it happen and really paying people what it needs to have those people get into that trade are important. For sure.
You said vessels that go port to port have to be American made, but what about the international boats that say drop off in Savannah and then they move up the coast and they hit a port in, I don't know, New York?
So most of the time those boats transfer that cargo to a U.S. Jones Act vessel, which adds a lot of cost to the voyage sometimes. Oh yeah. So, you can't go one port to U.S. port to another port directly without an international stop. Now I'm sure there's games you can play. I know on the West Coast, between Canada and the U.S., especially around the Seattle area, there are some games that they play as far as where they consider a port, where they go international real quick and then come back. But U.S. port to U.S. port is all Jones Act vessels. So the international vessels drop it somewhere and then it gets parceled out.
Austin, the more I talk to you, the more I realize that you have to be aware of and keep your eye on a lot of different things. I mean, river conditions are one thing, but when you start talking about the role that you play, that your company plays with farmers in terms of taking their crop and getting it onto the river, onto barges, and then shipping it out and getting it ready for exports and all of those things, this tariff conversation is a really scary one for a lot of farmers all over Mississippi and, frankly, all over the country. What are you hearing from farmers in particular that you're talking to in terms of level of concern and uncertainty?
I think this is definitely, they had a rough year last year, and I think they're very, very concerned. I think it's become a lot harder, and I'm not sure what the federal government has planned for relief, but if they plan on asking them just to tough it out, standing in the rain without an umbrella, there's going to be a lot of small farmers go out and a lot of big farmers gobble them up. And I don't think that's what we want in Mississippi. So I really hope there's some kind of backfill here that'll protect these farmers, and our whole agricultural industry, because this radiates past the farmer. This talks about this hurts the people that sell tractors. This hurts the people that sell seed and fertilizer and chemical, and then the people that transport it ultimately suffer also. So, I want these guys to have bumper crops and big yields and banner years every year, and I want to be moving product that's profitable. in any sector I'm operating in. So if my customer's hurting, I'm hurting, and so I'm hoping they get some relief from this process.
If you talk about a reduction in exports, does that mean less traffic on the river?
For sure. I mean, for sure. I think things like coal now are going export. A lot of the oil and gas that we move is exported. Soybeans, obviously, big export. Corn. Yeah. So if all this stuff has to find a home domestically or doesn't leave the country, yeah, for sure. I think you're going to see tonnage on the river slip. A little quick fact. I know we're up on time here, but tonnage on the river actually was at its peak in the 90s. And so as coal has come offline, as more pipelines have been built, more rails have been built, there's actually less tonnage on the river now than there was in the 90s. So from a volume standpoint, we can't take much more loss for sure.
Austin, it's always interesting and fascinating, and I learn something every time we visit. Appreciate you coming on, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Hey, Richard, thanks for everything, and I hope you have a great week and rest of your weekend.
You as well. Happy Easter to you. Austin Golding, President and CEO of Golding Barge Line, joining us this morning on Mornings with Richard Cross. It is a fascinating industry and one that, I'll be honest, I don't know that we think about a lot. I will raise my hand as guilty as that. You cross the bridge going from Mississippi into Arkansas or Mississippi going into Louisiana, and you see barges, and you're like, oh, yeah, the barges on the river, and don't think about how important a role they play. Quick timeout, 8 o'clock hour coming up. Visit with Drake Bassett from Palmer Home next.